Welcome back. So I've been wanting to touch on a few news topics for a little while now, and how things have wrapped up and some of the events that have transpired over the last week or so kind of give me a much more complete narrative arc to what some of these stories are. So in the vein of like a Philip DeFranco type show, I'm just going to go through some of these news topics really quickly and just give my spin on them. Now, I realize that by weighing in on one issue in particular regarding Linux Mint and the perceptions of it in the community and that kind of thing, I realized that I could very easily be accused of perpetuating clickbait. And for the sake of the video, I'm happy to own that. That is fine. But at the same time, I think I'm trying to lend a positive light to this, or at least a positive slant to it. So bear with me. And there's a few other things that I want to touch on as well. I'll start by kind of looking at the microscopic issue where these things came from, but then I'll try and give a bit of context and kind of zoom out from the issue a little bit and look at what are the bigger what are the bigger situations, context issues that are going around here in the free and open source software community that has kind of perpetuated these moments. All right, so backing it up to a little over a week ago, there was an article that was written by James Sanders from the Tech Republic called Scientific Linux and Antergos are shutting down. It's time for Linux Mint to go as well. Now, first of all, when I heard Antergos was shutting down, I was obviously, as somebody who's been invested in Linux for quite some time, I was obviously a little bit disappointed in a lot of ways. But at the same time, it's been a while since I personally used Antergos, and while it is an amazing distribution and lots of people recommended it to me, I guess it's just the reality of developers not having enough free time to maintain a project and being able to see that their time or that the community could be better served elsewhere. Now that's very different from a project like Linux Mint. Basically, the duck's guts of this article is that really a project like Linux Mint, according to this author, is really there to maintain Cinnamon as a desktop environment. And he wants to see Cinnamon become more distro agnostic, which it already is. I would argue you can run Cinnamon basically on any distro base you want, and therefore he believes that eliminates the need for Linux Mint as a distribution overall. Now, what I guess the larger context of what's going on here is that, as most of you would be aware, back in March of 2019 on the Linux Mint blog, the main developer and founder of Linux Mint went into the blog post with a seeming amount of pessimism in terms of a lot of the big changes that they'd made over the last year or so in how they present themselves, what their priorities are. They seem to be receiving a lot more negative feedback than positive, and it was just a heart-to-heart in terms of their overall feel of their developer community. And just that they felt like the changes that they were making weren't as visible or as tangible as what they would have liked, and so it was just a bit of a grind, basically. Now, in classic media form, this was interpreted by a lot of different outlets as the Linux Mint team being depressed, and the Linux Mint team having lost motivation and lost any passion for the project. And so a lot of people were starting to put the writing on the wall for Linux Mint as a project. Now, then we fast forward a few months to the update they've released in May, and they're very, very appreciative of all of the support and positive feedback and emails and all kinds of stuff that was sent through to them over the course of the last 2 months. And all this is to say that Linux Mint isn't going anywhere. They received a record amount of donations over the last month. There's $24,000. That's not an amount to sneeze at. That is one healthy project going on right here. And so they just go on business as usual. They've got a new community website that they have updated the look of it. And and then they've just gone on with a few other bits and pieces that they're dealing with, winding up to the Linux Mint 19.2 release, I'm going to assume. So I guess all this is to say it's a little bit of a storm in a teacup, but at the same time, it's amazing what can happen when you take a small situation like the lead developer of a open source project saying that it's just been a tough couple of weeks / months for them, and how quickly that can be snowballed out to either a bunch of hate just being piled on Linux Mint saying, yep, no, why is it even here? No one uses it, when that's totally not the case. You can just see just by the amount of users that have logged on to the community website and become part of the community. There's 28,000 website users here. That is by no means nobody. So Linux Mint's a powerful project, and really, I think that the big takeaway for all of us in the free and open source software community is, even if you do not use Linux Mint, even if you prefer another Linux distribution, you should be doing all you can to make these projects better and make these projects look good in the eyes of the rest of the tech world. And honestly, chucking hate and vitriol around is kind of become a bit of a trend in the last 5 to 10 years, and as Lunduk had pointed out on one of his episodes of his show, there's probably the biggest difference between the Linux community now and 10 years ago is that it seems to be a little bit more corporate, it's a little bit more grown up, there's some bigger investors that are involved here, and but at the same time, it does feel like the user bases of Linux have a lot more in common than we have and then we have differences. And but it seems like we all get very hung up on those differences. So in I guess risking sounding incredibly cheesy and kumbaya-ish, get around these projects and show them love, even if they're not your personal preference, because what is good for one of them is good for all of them, and that's just how free and open source software works. Now, the second issue that I really want to point to is the fact that Linux as a technology is being taken an awful lot more seriously in the last few years than it ever has before. In fact, I would argue that all of my dreams are basically coming true in terms of seeing Linux adopted in the way that it is, in the scale that it is. There is no way any of us would have seen the purchase price of a company like Red Hat being acquired by IBM 10 years ago. There is no way that any of us would have even been thinking that a Linux-focused company like Canonical would be even just rumored to begin with, rumored of an IPO. Of becoming a publicly traded company. And also there'd be very little chance of this happening, where now we have the official Unity 3D game development engine editor available for Linux, officially supported by Unity themselves on the leading, most stable, most popular platforms. All of these are just signs of the fact that Linux as a platform has grown up. And all of the work that goes into different projects like Purism with PureOS, and the Librem 5, which I'm going to touch on in just a second, Elementary OS and what they've been plugging away at, and Linux Mint, no less. All of this leads to the industry really sitting up and taking notice of what is happening and the potential that Linux has. So it was great to see an official announcement a few days ago that the Unity development editor was going to be coming to Linux and officially supported. So I thought it would just play a nice little part here in this wider story that I'm telling. So all of these are really positive, I think, updates, and there's no reason to allow or to let announcements by projects saying that they're shutting down or that they're scaling back affect the optimism and affect the flavor of the free and open source software community, because honestly, it's really just redirection. A lot of the people that are working on these projects are going on to work on other projects, and they can see the needs of their original community being met by another project. So that's how the world works. And in other news, I guess the third thing that I wanted to talk about is Librem 5. This hasn't been something that I've talked about on my channel at all, really, but it's a fascinating project. So for a little bit of context, Purism is a company that's been working on basically having a complete hardware software lineup that is powered by free and open source software that can kind of give you privacy and security and all that kind of stuff independent of the big tech companies. And so the Librem 5 is the phone representation of that, and they have a fully crowdfunded campaign
And development is steadily going ahead with adopting a GNOME-based interface on a phone. So they've got just a monthly update, I guess, of what's happening there. But if you're interested and you want to pick one up for yourself, the pre-orders are sitting, I think, at $650, and yeah, I'm stoked to see this happen, because we never saw the Ubuntu phone happen back in 2011 or 2012, whenever that was. So I'm more than keen to see something actually launch off the ground, and for those who want it, they can go and get it. Also, they do have Pure OS that you can download the beta of that if you're interested in a very, very privacy, security-centered Linux distribution, as are most of them. But I get the feeling that in our day and age, and with affiliate links and all of that fun stuff that seems to tarnish the reputation of projects like Ubuntu or Linux Mint or others, then Purism and Pure OS might appeal to you. Alright, so really that's all I wanted to talk about with the news side of things. There's just a lot of exciting stuff, and I don't think we need to be perpetuating the fear, uncertainty, and doubt campaign that would be possibly on the radar of other people. Right, so with all that said, a few things coming up on my channel. I will be having a de-Googlify your life kind of episode around Google Play Music, because it's something that I personally have relied on for many years, and I'm looking to move away from that with the help of friends over at Plex and Synology. So I'll have a video about that that will integrate some of the products and services there that you can check out and adapt some of those principles to your own life if you're wanting to. And also, I've been looking into the beta release of Zorin OS. Zorin OS is obviously is one of those distributions that bridges the gap between Windows users and Linux users. But I've got to say, just the amount of polish that has gone into even just the beta release of this distribution is really impressive. And so, yeah, I'll be curious to see how long it takes before the full release launches. Let me know if you'd like me to look into this distribution in its beta form, and I'd be more than happy to do that, because, yeah, like I said, I really dig what they're doing, and for desktop Linux, we may as well give it a whirl. Also, let me know in the comments if there's other projects you'd like me to look at. I'm definitely looking into Void Linux at the moment. There's been a lot of requests for that, and the last video that you saw also came from suggestions and comments from you guys as well. So let me know what you think, and feel free to weigh in. How do you feel about the state of the Linux free and open source community at the moment? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next episode. Peace out, ladies and gentlemen.